Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to take a pause here for a moment and allow our attendees to join us. Great, looks like we've got some people joining. Just give it another second here and I will get this kicked off. Well, great, looks like we've got a good crowd here that's joined this call. And I apologize, my fan is going and I realize that sometimes that makes it a little bit hard to hear me. So bear with me for just a moment. I'll just get this run through quick. So welcome to month 2 of NAIFA's onboarding program, You Are the Brand. My name is Emily Cabbage and I'm the Associate Director of Member Programs at NAIFA, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode. If you have questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We'll also have some time for Q&A during the middle of the presentation and at the end. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Brian Haney, or as many in the NAIFA community know him as B Dizzle. Brian's been involved with NAIFA for over 10 years. He's a 16-year industry veteran operating an independent family-owned practice with his father and brother in the greater Washington, D.C. area. A self-avowed tech junkie, he launched the That's My Financial Guide podcast in 2019 and is continually building and refining his firm's digital and marketing framework. Brian has been fortunate to have received much industry recognition, including MDRT Lifetime Qualifier since 2009, MDRT Core to the Table Qualifier since 2014, and a Top of the Table Qualifier for the last 3 years. Brian is also a NAIFA National Quality Award recipient each year since 2013. Brian was also named one of NAIFA's prestigious 4 Under 40 in 2017, as well as the Diversity Champion in 2018. Brian was named to the Washington Business Journal's 40 Under 40 in 2019 and was named as one of NALBA's ID 20 recipients in 2019. Brian definitely bleeds NAIFA blue. He's an active board member of NAIFA Greater Washington and currently serving as the media past president. Brian serves on the National YAT Committee, Independent Advisor Committee, and on NAIFA's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. Finally, Brian acts as NAIFA's LACP chairman and has played a vital role in launching this designation. Brian was formerly a private banker and investment associate for SunTrust Investment Services and a licensed banker at Wachovia Bank, where he began his career. Brian resides in Silver Springs, Maryland, with his daughter and wife. He's a 2002 graduate of Indiana University. Go Hoosiers. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to Brian, who is going to kick off our presentation. Brian?
Thanks, Emily. How's everybody doing? Hey there, NAIFA. I got to tell you, it's a real privilege to be able to talk to you today. I'm very excited, very pleased to be asked to do this. And I want to start really, before I get into that, by just saying congratulations to each one of you for making probably one of the most significant professional decisions you can make in joining NAIFA. All of the wonderful things that Emily kind of talked about, half of those would not be possible without my involvement in NAIFA. It has been a foundational piece to my professional life as well as my personal life. And the relationships that I've been able to form in the last decade are second to none. So just congratulations on starting what's going to be a fruitful and prosperous journey for yourself. And I'm excited that I can help hopefully steer you in the right direction when it comes to a significantly important part of your success, and that is your brand. So as the title says, and what we do in this industry, you, your practice, are the brand. And my presentation is really going to cover, at a high level, understanding what brand identity looks like specifically in today's digital economy. But I'm also going to go through kind of some components to branding that hopefully you may or may not have thought of. So that way, at the end of this, you'll have both the high level understanding as well as some very granular ways to move your brand forward, assess yourself, and maybe implement some strategies that are going to make you a more visible digital you and take you to places you haven't been yet in 2020 and beyond. We already kind of covered a lot of that. Again, none of this would have been possible without NAIFA. So you know, you're starting a journey that has, you know, significantly high ceiling and a lot of potential for growth. Before I get into any details about anything, I just want to take a few seconds to let you type in, are there any questions that you have, or is there anything that you would really want to know about branding or marketing in general before I even get in? You can use the question and answer button just to type some things in, and I'll just wait a little bit to see if there's anything that you want to tell me before I even get started. All right, I don't see any questions being typed, so that's fine. We'll keep going. There will also be time at the end for, oh, here's one that popped up. How do we see AI
taking over space?
Yeah, that's okay. That's an excellent question, and actually, it's funny that you asked that because you'll see I addressed some of that in the next few slides. So feel free to continue to type any questions throughout the presentation. I will address them, maybe not as I'm going, but I'll make sure to cover them by the end of this. So be as engaged as you can be. I'm going to go through to that initial question, really the state of the union when it comes to our industry. And again, I know a lot of people may have a variety of different types of practices depending on where you are. Maybe you have an assets under management practice, maybe you have a P&C practice, maybe you're with a major life carrier like a Mass Mutual or a Northwestern, or maybe you have something in between. But I'm really going to try to make sure that I get a framework for the totality of kind of where we are today in 2020. Obviously, we're going to focus on what do you need to do about all of that. We're going to go through in a very strategic and thoughtful way how to develop a unique brand for yourself and your practice. And then probably one of the most important things once you have a brand developed is how do you carry that brand effectively across all mediums of communication and market engagement, which is not something that actually the average professional in our industry does very well. So let's get it out the gate and talk digital disruption. I don't think anybody that's going to be listening to this now or in the future is going to disagree that we are in the era of digital and a technological society. You know, if the largest movie house doesn't own films, right, and the largest taxi company doesn't actually own any taxi cabs, technology and really the digital industry is not just here, but it's here to stay. You know, I usually ask people to raise their hands if they've heard of the internet. Obviously, all of us have because we're on a Zoom call. And if you'd like to debate whether or not you think it's just a passing fad, feel free to type that right now into the Q&A bar and let me know if you think the internet's just a fad and we don't have to worry about it for long term. But I think all kidding aside, you know, these are some mass social, economic, and business disruptions that have happened. And, you know, these are elements to what I'm going to talk about, not just industry disruption, but it's social, personal, and really behavioral disruption as well. And I'll get into that in a little bit. As it relates to our industry, not just AI, but Fintech in general is a massive component of, you know, where a lot of money is being funneled into financial technology, whether it's things focused on delivering products or policies or, you know, engaging in the consumer demand, answering questions. Tons of money and resources are getting poured into fintech. And again, this is not something that I think is going backwards. If anything, it's going to continue to go in this direction because there's a huge appetite for delivering really information and delivering a lot of value to a consuming market that is expecting to receive things digitally. So regardless of what type of practice you have, likely it's hit you already. And if you don't think it has, it probably will. So let's talk about AI, right? If you got an assets under management practice, the reality is that the robo space is here, it's here to stay. And there are people that will go in and, you know, take advantage of managing their own investment portfolios this way. And so that's just, again, something to be aware of. It's not just maybe, you know, the Merrill Lynches of the world or, you know, the LPL advisors or whatever you would consider the person-to-person threat to that business. It's also the fact that you don't need to work with a person to invest your money. I don't know how many of you have ever seen Breeze or been introduced to Meet Breeze. I don't know if you've ever written a disability policy. This is what you need to be aware of. Disability is not immune to this. Meet Breeze is actually a direct-to-consumer disability website designed to deliver disability coverage to the consuming public. It is actually underwritten by a surety, which is, for those of us that do a little bit of disability, a fairly decent sized player in that market. So don't think if you're writing disability, you're immune. And oh, by the way, can people buy life insurance online? Well, we already know that they can. What's really interesting is most people haven't heard of Haven Life. This is also, again, another direct-to-consumer term life insurance product. But what people may not realize is that it's underwritten by Mass Mutual. Mass Mutual being one of the oldest and largest career agency shops in the nation, has developed and put out a product line that cuts out an agent and doesn't pay commissions. So if you think about that for just a disruption standpoint as a great example, you have a company's that's entire brand identity has been built around being a career agent company, but they're taking a step outside of that comfort zone to deliver this. So again, not something to say whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, but these are the things that we all need to be aware of. We don't even need to get into the fact that you can get auto insurance online. I think most of us that ever touch the P&C part of the industry are aware that that's been something that's always kind of been there as well. So I've tried to say it in every possible way. Our new reality for us as professionals is that a significant portion of somebody's financial experience can be done without us. And I'm not here to tell you whether I think that that's good or bad. For me, personally and professionally, I don't think it's a bad thing, but it is something that we need to reconcile with, because the expectations, how I mentioned earlier, what does this mean, not just for you as a professional, but for us as an industry, and really, what does this mean for society? We need to start to understand that technology has disrupted how we even make buying decisions and really how we think about these things, because our entire process for engaging in these, in the decision-making process as it relates to our money is being changed, whether or not we're thinking about it. So that's kind of, the high-level impact we want to be focusing on. All right. What are you going to do about it? We're going to get into brand thinking now. So brand thinking really, branding in general is the embodiment of your corporate identity and how that gets communicated to your target audience, which are both prospects and clients, as well as the market at large. So these are components of brand thinking, and these aren't necessarily things, depending on how long you've been in the industry, and frankly, these aren't even industry-specific things that we tend to think about when it comes to developing a practice. Why is it that we do what we do? Why do you matter? Why does it matter to you? Knowing who you are as a professional and having a good, solid understanding of your own professional identity. And then being comfortable being who you are to the market, as there are going to be a lot of things that may happen as you grow a practice that make you uncomfortable, or just as you're stretching yourself as a professional. So making sure that you're grounded and solidified in your own brand, so that way you can navigate those types of things effectively. How do you really offer who you are? Remember, this presentation is titled Brand You. So I think the statement I want to really emphasize is that the consuming public doesn't buy our stuff, they buy us. Anybody can get, as I already identified, they can get all of these deliverables without us. So if somebody says yes to you and buys a policy, invests money, engages in a financial plan, whatever the case may be, they did it because you did something unique and significant in their lives to allow them to make that decision to purchase or to, invest. You helped them move the needle in their financial world. And that's why it's important that you recognize that and are able to offer that and allow the consuming public to understand that, because that's what they're thinking about if they're going to consider working with someone like us. If they're not, if they're going to do things on their own, then you're not going to have to worry about it, because that's probably not the part of the competitive landscape that you're going to be trying to focus on. And you're only going to be able to grow yourself as well. So we'll get to that. All right. What do you do? And this is really not a question of I'm a P&C agent, or I'm an insurance broker, or I'm an investment person, or I'm a fill in the blank. It's really a function of what's my actual tangible deliverable that isn't a policy, product, or investment, right? We're not in the insurance or investment business anymore. We are in the human transformation business, because that business is the business that our industry is about. And that's the industry component that is here to stay, that AI won't ever be able to disrupt. Human transformation, people change based off of relationships. They don't necessarily change by consuming data through a dispassionate web portal. Not just what do you do, as importantly, and maybe more so, why do you do what you do? And really, when you think about this, you need to be able to clearly communicate what you believe as it relates to your professional identity, not just why, you know, in the ethereal. Like for me, what my why is, it's about family, it's about relationships, it's about purpose. I think that the financial industry, that working with money, is possibly the greatest industry in the entire world. You know, the number one thing that people are challenged by is money. So money is the universal language that everybody has to speak and figure out, right? And if you're not fluent in money, you're going to need some help. So what a great thing to do to really have an impact in as many people's lives as humanly possible. So I have a passion for it in a large sense and in a very personal sense. And these things are important, not for me just to know in the back of my mind, but to also weave into my brand identity. And that's where your ethos comes into play. How I mentioned earlier, what is branding? Branding is taking your corporate identity, taking that brand you, and being able to now essentially almost quantify it and communicate it, so that way somebody can understand what you do and why you do it, and determine if they feel like there's synergy, like you're going to be able to help them, that through a relationship with you, they're going to start to see their financial concerns addressed, their needs met, and they can start to see how you could lead them into the future that they're trying to tackle for themselves, right? So where do you need to start, right? And I think where digital comes into play, because we've just kind of spent a lot of time, it's almost like high-level philosophy. This is where the digital landscape is a revolutionary opportunity for us. We have the opportunity to tell our stories in a more significant, frankly, to a mass audience, and in a more meaningful way than we ever have before. We can do things online that, you know, would take us a lot more time, energy, and effort to do if we were always just about doing things in person. So, you know, as we're going to go through a brand component, this is all part of how do I do a better job of storytelling. Storytelling is the oldest form of human communication. It's something that I just am significantly passionate about. I actually have my bachelor's degree is not in finance, it's not in business, it is in journalism. So I like communicating and finding ways to communicate more effectively, listening to my clients and prospect stories, weaving mine into theirs. It's a passion point for me. And that's the best way for any of us to reinforce to our clients and our prospects that we are a valuable asset in their lives. All right, so branding. Branding is now about delivering value and communicating that value to your audience on their terms. So I think one of the things that I'm going to suggest that you start to do is when you're asking those questions, why you, make sure you answer them for yourselves, but also allow your clients or the people that you have relationships with to answer them for you as well. Because that may be where you get some of the best data for how you can incorporate your brand. If you know why somebody said yes to you, that's the greatest answer as to what you might be able to replicate in the future. And that's a framework that's really important. So these are just some practical tips for ways that you can develop your own brand component. And these are some of the things that have been a critical part to my business development, both in person and online. So find a way to connect people together. What can that look like? You know, if you have somebody that's running a business, don't just figure out how you can help protect their business, invest their money, do their benefits. Maybe find out who their customers are, who the people that they need to be in relationship with in order for them to grow successfully. Dig into that business story and find those people and bring them together. It's a great example. Another great way to be a connector is, you know, if you're a member of a networking group or obviously a chamber of commerce or some membership organization, is just finding ways to, you know, listen well to certain people and bring some parties together where you see synergies might exist. Doing it without it being all about you and what you can do is huge, because people see that you're taking advantage of the psychological principle of reciprocity. If you do a favor for somebody else, they are naturally inclined to want to return the favor for you. Being a part of a cause, most of us do things that are philanthropic in nature. We care about community. We care about, you know, whether it's saving whales or the planet or personal causes, addressing homelessness. For me, it's you know, serving refugees, because that's a massive human crisis that we're experiencing at this day. And right, whatever it is for you, though, finding ways to build relationships and letting people know that these are the things that are important to you matters, because a lot of times we actually don't share those parts very effectively as professionals. And it does matter. It does make up our brand identity, and it's something that you want to be mindful of. How can you deliver value at your cost? Don't ever do anything for free, because the last thing that you got for free, you didn't value that too much. So your language does matter. Join committees, find ways to serve. I've been on a ton of boards. I'm going to continue to be on a ton of boards. There's a lot of opportunities for you to develop a brand and to elevate your profile by, you know, joining, volunteering, and then, you know, running in a capacity that allows you to show that you're a leader. So board opportunities really are great, you know, whatever brand resume builders to elevate your profile, because you get to be in a position of leadership. All of this is really about differentiation. Now we're going to get into something really practical. How often do you think of the colors that you use? I would venture to guess, if you're like me, not very often, until I was kind of drawn into this and made aware of it for my own self. But, you know, I'm not saying this to get all of us excited and really engaged in thinking so strategically about every tie that you wear or anything like that, but to understand that it is important to really assess the entirety of your brand. So to look at not just the things that you say online, but the way that you look. All of these things matter. It's interesting, you know, if I'm wearing blue, as you'll see in a lot of financial arenas, you know, is that kind of this psychological element of dependability, strength, and trust. But different colors give off different subconscious emotions. And so, you know, these are things that it's good to think of. It's good to be aware of. It's good to have a color scheme if you have the opportunity to have your own independent brand. Or if you're part of a corporate practice, if you're a State Farm agent, or, you know, find an effective way to take advantage of the corporate brand that exists, but obviously to use it to leverage your own personal brand, because it's critical, right? People aren't going to necessarily just buy State Farm. They're going to buy the State Farm agent. Or, you know, if that's, you know, a Mass Mutual, whatever that is, you know, you want to find that flexibility, because this is, you have to personalize this for yourself. If I were to ask, and certainly you can respond in the notes if you want to, I'm sure all of us have a bio. How many of us have a bio that's actually written with our audience in mind? Okay, again, different type of brand thinking. Our value propositioning, a lot of times the challenge that we have, and the reason why I think the average industry professional doesn't do the best job of standing out from among the crowd or distinguishing yourself in such a way that, you know, your online audience finds you more engaging than the next person, is because we do a wonderful job at talking at the consuming public. And nobody likes being talked at. Nobody likes receiving canned LinkedIn posts that, you know, if you're using a certain service, that you and maybe 100 other of you also can use that same pre-done post as an easy example. And bios that are written in a fun and engaging way that talk to somebody on their audience's terms are very rare. Most of it's kind of, you know, here's who I am, here's where I'm from, here's what I do, here's why I'm wonderful. And it's not that that's not good to be aware of, but there's a more effective way and a more engaging way of writing that that's going to be better received by your audience than just the standard way that we've done it, right? It's not just erecting our resume online as if somebody's going to then somehow hire us to do what we do. Looking at your website, you know, what is your brand identity when it comes to the web presence that you have? Obviously, we're getting into social media, how these convey, you know, do your print materials line up with the things that you have on your bio, your website? Is your language, is your messaging, is there uniformity? I'm going to get into a term called cognitive dissonance in a second. Thinking about your voicemail, did you know that you can have a little bit of fun on your voicemail? You know, it's a great, because what are the chances of somebody going to call you and actually leave you a message? Or even if they don't leave you a message, they're going to hear something. That small element can actually have a significant impact because it's another opportunity to communicate brand that we don't tend to think about. Right? And consistency is key. And this is obviously one of my favorite brand identity pictures of all time. I know that if you were in public, all of you would be laughing, so this is great. But consistency is key. So I mentioned the term cognitive dissonance. And if you don't really know what that is, or even if you do, I'm going to define what I mean as it relates to branding. And this is probably one of the most significant things that people are challenged by. Cognitive dissonance is really about consistency. We do not, as human beings, like inconsistency. We don't like to be seen as inconsistent. We also don't like inconsistency in, you know, the public, in relationships, etc. You know, we all know what it's like, what we call somebody who says one thing and does something else, right? A lot of pejoratives around what that looks like. But how that now relates to a brand and how we're communicating in a digital audience is a lot of times the way that we talk, the things that we show our clients, and the image that we have online, there's inconsistency. And it might even be small, it might be subtle. The reason why it exists is because we haven't really taken the time to be as thoughtful about that as we should be. And so without knowing it, you may be creating cognitive dissonance, which creates this subconscious, I don't really know about this person or this practice. And yet, you know, that means that before you even sit down with somebody or talk to them online or give them a phone call, you might have already communicated something that's creating a bit of a barrier that you're going to now have to overcome without even knowing it, right? So consistency and understanding what your message, what your visual identity, what your engagement looks like is hugely paramount. And now, if you haven't done this already, you got to embrace digital transformation. Okay, so this is taking that ethos, taking that identity, taking your value, your mission statement, who you are, what you do online, and now engaging a mass audience, right? Taking your brand and then also going through a process that figures out what are the best ways for you to engage based on your target audience. Not everybody needs to do the same thing all the time. You really want to have, as much as you have your own brand and your own identity, you're going to want to also try to do a good job of creating buyer personas. So understanding that target audience, where are they engaging? What questions are they asking? What are their common pain points? And where do they go to find information? How do they think about working with somebody in our industry? These are all the considerations that it's really important for you to figure out, because that's going to be the most effective way for you to build a marketing program with that brand to reach your target audience. So a lot of times we don't think about that. We just kind of get out there and do the best that we can to spread our message, or we try to use LinkedIn based off of all these cool LinkedIn techniques to get business. A lot of that can work. I would just say, if I'm going to have that level of engagement and effort, I want to be as strategic as humanly possible so that way my ROI is as high as it can be. So that dives into, you know, how are we going to figure out what technologies you should be looking I know it's kind of reinforcing the same point, but 62% of millennials do not feel like that feel that their online content drives their loyalty, but most of them don't feel that, whether it's a massive organization or even personal individuals, that people are developing content that is specific to them, that is meeting their needs, that is tailoring themselves to their needs. 90% of millennials will share their brand preferences online. So in this era of digital revolution and digital transformation, we're getting into this kind of socialnomics concept, where if we do this right, finding people that are going to be brand ambassadors and digital cheerleaders for us is much easier, much more effective, and you can develop significant amount of loyalty. It doesn't all have to be just person to person. Now you've got word of mouth is now world of mouth, right? People can talk about you in their own posts. People can recommend you. There's so many more ways that you can create a team of people that are really going to allow your brand to take off to new heights. So this is really important. We're in the experience economy. I don't know if you've been to Disney World, but I usually ask the question if I'm in a room full of people, how many people have ever gone to Disney World for just one day? And then for the hands that go up, then I have to say, well, outside of it being for a work event, usually that takes care of that second component. The reality is you don't do Disney for a day. If you have kids, you definitely don't do Disney for a day unless you want your kids to eat. So I'm not trying to harp on the Disney component, but the reality is Disney is a great example of how they've mastered experience. Their brand value is such that you spend a ton of money to have this type of an experience. And oh, by the way, 70 to 73% of people that have done it once do it again. So their return customers are huge, and they have a tremendous brand that they've been very strategic about managing and delivering that experience. And that's kind of what we need to be mindful of as it relates to our industry. How do people experience you as a professional? It's not about service anymore. That used to be kind of one of the ways that you could stand out, and I'm certainly not throwing service under the bus because we all need to master service. The service is now kind of the expectation. It's not the unique distinguisher. And it doesn't get you as far as it used to. And in fact, it can be a big significant issue that can turn off, can create cognitive dissonance, because if you're great up front, but you're bad on the back end, you know, that can have a serious impact. And everything's about personalization. You know, it's called an iPhone, where the optimal word or the optimal letter is I, right? We're all getting things that is meant to be just for us. You know, when's the last time you went on Facebook and you see these ads and you're like, oh man, I was just talking to so-and-so about this and now I'm seeing an ad, right? We're seeing, you know, messaging because of mass data mining that's all personalized, trying to meet us on this individual level. And so we have to be that strategic and that mindful. And your clients will pay for experience with time. And that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for relationships. The most successful people in our industry have clients that stay with them for a long time and bring their friends and families to the table, and they stay with them as well. We don't want, we're not transactional in nature, at least most of us aren't. So, you know, how can you look at your brand value and talk to your clients and prospects about what it's like to have a good experience with you as a practitioner? All right. So this is the big build up to now. What should I do? Ryan, you've been talking about brand and all this cool stuff. I get it. What do I need to do? First thing you need to do is audit yourself. So if you haven't Googled yourself before, do that. Okay. And if you did it earlier today, congratulations, do it again. But the first thing you should be aware of as you're building out your brand and answering some of these questions, you need to see what you look like now already. And you want to examine some very, you know, common things. Where do you show up in searches? I'm not going to suggest that all of us need to invest in SEO, which is search engine optimization. There's a lot of reasons why spending that kind of money may or may not be the most valuable thing for you. And if you want to have more of a conversation about SEO, it's probably best for us to do that offline. But take a digital audit for yourself and just see what you look like online. Pay clear attention to the pictures that you see. A lot of us, hopefully most of us, have good professional pictures. on LinkedIn profile, what have you. But a lot don't. And so again, cognitive dissonance, right? If I'm acting like a professional, you meet me as a person, and then you go online and you see some cropped, selfie that I put in my profile, people don't necessarily say something about that, but they're thinking something that you probably don't want them to be thinking. I think everybody really should be on Facebook to some degree or another. How you decide whether it's personal, professional, or both. But a lot of people, there's too many people on it I think it's probably, important for you to figure out how to use that as part of that brand engagement. And again, I think a lot of this goes back to storytelling and really the opportunity that we now have to use technology to have conversations digitally. Whereas, it used to be, right? You go to all the networking events, you get out, you pound the pavement to have actual conversations in person. Well, now we just get to do that online. We can have a conversation on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on you name it. You can communicate without ever having to see somebody. So this is a great opportunity just to really facilitate good conversations. Again, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you should. I encourage everybody to take a look at mine, take a look at the pictures, take a look at my background, take a look at my titles. Now, some of us are going to turn around and we're going to get into this big, nasty C word, compliance. I get it. That's not, they aren't the no business department or the place you go to figure out no and here are the 12 reasons why I'm going to say no. And oh, wait, what's the question again? There are certain things that you can and cannot do, and everybody's got to face the compliance machine. I would really love to engage with you directly, or at least give you some encouragement that, find ways to still be effective even within whatever compliance framework that you have. Because things that I know that most compliance offices will allow you to do is they will allow you to have conversations. They will allow you to engage in an audience. They may not allow you to make recommendations or point to specific products or do certain things, but just having a general conversation, opening the door and starting to engage, that's a very effective business strategy. And so there's a lot of ways that you can take advantage of making sure that your brand identity is more solidified. So that way you're distinguishing yourself better and not necessarily you looking like the 100 other you that might work for your corporate, whether it's State Farm, Mass Mutual, Merrill Lynch, whatever that looks like. Now, Instagram, again, sharing pictures is always fun. And you got to look at the people now as part of your audience. Where are your audience? Where are they engaging? These are things that you want to really be thinking about. Creating a digital footprint, right? Very specifically, looking at your Facebook profile, looking at Facebook pages and groups. So, any of us that were, been watching any television or watched the Super Bowl, what have you, what has Facebook been advertising now the last several months? They've been advertising these groups, right? Talked about, there's one advertisement that I love personally where, the guy takes his daughter to a baseball game and now he's a part of this group of daddies with daughters that like baseball or whatever it is. So there's some real meaning to that. And you can tell that they're telling these stories in such a way that you're going to look at that like I did and be like, wow, that speaks to me for who I am and what I'm about, right? So that's what Facebook groups are all about. So there's a ton of them out there. It's a great way to get introduced to a commonality from a market standpoint and, build your brand identity within that group or develop some relationships, right? Get to know people based on these synergies that you have. And again, like I said, other areas, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, it's up to 240 characters. I think Twitter is probably one of the best places for, like I said, that conversation component. Throw out a question and just see what happens in your feed. See what people, write back. Great place to just get data, to let people talk and to just kind of get some engagement and feedback. Great for that. And social ads, some of the social ads are very inexpensive. You can spend, $10, $12 to boost a post or to do an advertisement on Facebook. So there's some very inexpensive ways to build out a better digital profile that don't involve spending thousands upon thousands of dollars, for custom marketing, SEO, et cetera. And then this is the Captain Obvious advice. All right, doing the simple stuff well. If you have the chance to buy a custom domain or 2 or 3 or 38, if it's our practice, do that. If you want to, I mean, I own brianjhaney.com. That's not my website, but, there are a lot of ways where you can get your own custom URL. And maybe it's not for your practice, but maybe it's for a marketing component. I'll give you an example of this. Our practice has bought protectmyexec.com because one of our largest markets is the association communities. We're working with a lot of executive association professionals. And we do a lot of things like, key person protection and planning in that arena. So buying that domain was really strategic because we're going to be building out site that's really a microsite designed to drive traffic and deliver content to our target market. So it doesn't have to be our company.com. You can also use custom URLs to create a content domain designed to really catch part of your audience in one of the areas that they are really looking for, right? Understand what keyword searches are all about. This is really important when it comes to any content that you produce, understanding how the searches work. If you want to have an interesting little test for yourself, start to type a question into the Google search bar and just see what autofills. So for some of your target audience, remember we talked about earlier, that buyer persona, what are the things that your clients might be asking online? What questions are they trying to get answered? Great way to figure that out, and also a very effective way for you to be plugging into that from a brand standpoint. Understand backlinks, anything that you put out, having people link to you and vice versa. I already mentioned profile photos, also mastering hashtags. Hashtags is still a major way people can run a search. So, sometimes people say hashtags have gone out of style. They haven't. You don't have to like them or hate them. They exist, and they exist for a reason. So make sure you use them strategically for yourself, because that's a major way that you can have your digital content work better for you and very easily. And a lot of people just don't do it. I mean, the average professional I see posting on LinkedIn doesn't use hashtags. And that's okay, but I think you're missing something that's going to give you a little bit of juice. It's simple, right? Captain Obvious says, do the simple stuff well. These are my tech commandments. Honor your brand and consider your audience. When you're thinking about putting a content out, whether it's a post, whether it's an email, whether it's a newsletter, first question I hope you've already asked is this something that the people I'm trying to reach would actually want to consume? Are they asking for this type of content or information? I said a lot of times we just talk to the consuming public without really realizing if we're speaking their language and if we're communicating in a manner that they want us to communicate in. The previous slide said that the majority of the millennial generation doesn't feel like the online content is reaching them in the way that they want to be reached. So hopefully, whatever you do in whatever ways that you communicate online, in person, in print, in what you wear, and all of this, you're considering the people you're trying to reach before you decide how you're going to do that. Always put out quality over quantity. I think one of the better ways to have a digital presence is to create kind of a rhythm for yourself, a schedule, if you will. Like I encourage people when they're starting to really build their online brand profile is to actually have a set day of the week where you maybe do your social media engagement. A lot of times we have to take this kind of scattershot approach, or we do it when we're thinking about it or when we're in social situations. I want to post this or that. And that can be fine. It's not overly strategic. And some of it might then erode the quality of what you're putting out there. So I would say, take a little bit of a less is more, assuming that what you end up putting out is higher quality. Don't overpost and don't be a serial liker. Don't be that one person that, everybody in your circle is going to count on you liking every single post. We all have one of those people. I'm not going to tell you who it is in my sphere of influence, but it's, that's while we all like to be liked, you don't want to be the one person that's doing that for everybody. And please, please, please do not become a LinkedIn stalker. Not a week goes by where I'm not getting these weird, strange, pre-written messages by somebody that's excited to connect with me and, writes it in such a way that really, I obviously know they're about to sell me something, but for whatever reason, they think that this pre-written up messaging is actually going to work and I'm going to respond to it. None of that works. And if that's something you've done, I would encourage you to stop or at least be more thoughtful about it. All right, tools. Talked about social media. Sales service component, right? CRM. Hopefully you have a way to manage your client relationships and the data that you're gathering, so that way you really have a good buyer persona, but you also have a system for managing all of those relationships over time. Incorporating things that aren't just the regular, name, address, serial number, date of birth, all that kind of stuff. Start to ask and put in these data points, like, ask somebody about their pets. Pet industry is $1 billion industry. People love their pets as much as they love their kids sometimes more. So, you want to stand out, you want to have a better brand experience, pay more attention to things that are important to people that don't commonly flow through a normal financial relationship. It's a good thing to do. Calendly, Zoom, we're already on Zoom, finding better ways to be digitally more available to the consuming public. How great is it to not have to trade emails back and forth to say, what's good for you? I don't know what's good for you. Just have somebody, hey, you want to schedule an appointment? Here you go. Click on this link, pick a day and time that works for you. Much more effective way for you to manage your time, your practice, and also to fill up your appointments. So great resource to use. We're doing video marketing. NAFA has a relationship with Real Wealth ClientCast. So if you want to have some really good content in the video domain, because by the way, videos are one of the most effective forms of marketing communication, because we learn twice as much visually as we do either in reading or just auditory form alone. So when you can have a video that speaks and has power, the staying power and the impact is considerably higher. So if you don't want to make your own videos, and maybe your compliance office wouldn't allow you to, that's a great resource to take advantage of. Hearsay Social, Podbean's a podcasting platform. There's a lot of those. If you're looking for help designing your own logo or building out a website, take a look at Wix or Fiverr. Great crowdsourcing resources available. Doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg to do it. And if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, don't pay somebody that's an expert to do it. You don't have to pay them a lot. If you want to create great white paper contents or ebooks, Designer is a great one. There's a couple others like that as well. And now to bring it all home, I congratulated for joining NAFA, and I told you that I probably wouldn't have half the stuff of success or any of the accolades without it. So now's the time to really figure out that NAFA is going to be a huge part of helping you develop a brand identity. So first things first, alphabet soup. That's a great way to stand out, right? People do not look for generalists, they look for experts. And you're not an expert unless you have a designation that says so. Or at least it's a lot harder to be considered an expert unless you've already found some kind of a way to distinguish yourself and have that kind of expertise in a brand setting, right? Unless you're already Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman or whatever, and whether you like those personalities or not, they have their own brand, so they don't have to have the alphabet soup. Most of us do need that, and so take advantage of that. Get your LACP, get your LUTCF. These are just really extremely important, obviously, to learn, to grow, to become more, to be a better professional for yourself, but to stand out. Professional designations are, I think, essential. And I try to get a new one each year, or every 18 months. How can you elevate your own profile? Look for opportunities to get awards or a service, or to be seen and recognized for the things that you do that don't all flow through your production or your practice. That's really important. And NAFA's Quality Award is a great example of that. I've been fortunate enough to get it every year since 2013. And there are many other ways to do that. So poke around NAFA.org for yourself and see some of these opportunities. Learn how to become a real, true leader. You need to consider Lilly, Leadership and Life Institute. Depending on where you are in your practice and kind of your professional life, that may be something that you consider now. If you're a little bit more seasoned veteran, or if you're newer kind of in the industry, you might wait a few years. But that is a hugely advantageous resource to go through. 6-month program that you just come out of that a better person, better leader, better in just about every way I can imagine. Great resource. And then just, I could probably spend an entire day with everybody going through all the resources NAFA has. You just want to get in and take advantage of it. Figure out where your practice is hurting or what things you might need. And chances are there's a way for you to pull something out of the NAFA library that can help you. So maximize NAFA for your own brand as you're trying to elevate yourself. Let the organization help you out. NAFA is here to see you succeed, because NAFA doesn't succeed if you don't. So That's probably my final thought for the day. Now, questions, comments, concerns, needs, desires, longings, or considerations. Let's see. As fintech gets bigger, how are you seeing the small shops compete, especially when the carriers are reducing commissions as a result of this? That's a great question. I'm not going to necessarily guess the type of practice that you're operating, but I still think that size to me doesn't matter as much. It does in parts of the industry where volume has a role, but in terms of maybe brand value and positioning, I think small or large, really, we have such a great opportunity to develop unique practice areas and specialization, right? So if you're a small shop, that whether you do some, whether you're kind of a broad generalist type of practice, I would venture to guess you probably have certain target markets that are your largest client focus. So I think the thing about it is take the technology and find ways to then carry your brand into your target audiences better and more effectively. Because a lot of times, we're kind of taught to focus on niches as we grow our practices, and we are always aware of that. And maybe we've done that successfully over the years. But now is the opportunity to take all of that to a new level, right? To really use the digital landscape to drive a better stake in the ground for your own brand, to be seen as more of an industry expert, not just a financial expert. And I think that's the next step that to kind of answer not just the fintech question, but really what I hope to see and what we're trying to do with our own practice is we have the opportunity now to be considered experts in the industries that we serve, to be known as somebody that understands that industry as well as the people that are in it. And to find ways to effectively communicate that kind of brand value. So that way, by the time they get to the fact that, oh, you're a financial person that really gets what I do, that's much better than just somebody who sells insurance or manages assets. As it comes to the buying and selling of books and that kind of stuff, that's a challenging part of the marketplace. So I don't necessarily know that I'd want to speculate as to what I think that's going to do. I will say this, that there are a lot more buyers for business than there ever have been. I think there's a massive opportunity to grow through partnership, acquisition, or to look for ways to get scale, if that's maybe part of your growth strategy. And I think that the barriers to doing that have really gone down. So that's another good thing to be looking at, if that's part of your plan, practice, or value. What other questions exist? All right.
Okay, we'll give people a second if they had to type some more questions, but let me once again, on behalf of NAFA, thank you guys for participating in this. This will be recorded and it will be available on the same site that you registered. We do have all 12 months now scheduled and available for registration. Our next session for the onboarding will be on March 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And this topic will be Advocacy 101. And so advocacy is one of the major things that NAFA does very well. And just even being a member of NAFA, you're helping to protect our industry and your clients. And at this webinar, you'll increase grassroots efforts with training from NAFA's government relations team, learn how to talk to representatives, and build relationships with policymakers on Capitol Hill and at your state and at the state level. So Brian mentioned a lot of resources that are available out there now. So if you, I'll send everybody a link to this new updated site that we've got that has all of the sessions to register for. That's what the purpose of these onboarding calls are supposed to be, is that every month we're going to take a look at some of the things that NAFA can help you be the best producer, advisor, agent possible, and all the resources that we can help you do that. So so that's what the next 12 months are going to look like, and I'll send that link out.
Emily, can I say one last thing before we wrap up?
Absolutely.
For anybody that maybe I went through and covered a lot of ground. If you would like some help, just going through kind of a brand exercise, I do have a worksheet that I can use that I'd be more than happy to send to you, and then have a 30 to 45 minute just one-on-one Zoom call to kind of help you go through very strategically a brand overhaul for yourself. If that's something that you would like, just send me an email or contact me about it. It's free for anybody that wants to take advantage of it. Be happy to help you do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And thanks everyone for joining. Like I said, I will send out this link so that you can get this posted. It will probably be early next week. NAFA is closed on Monday for President's Day, but we will get that out to you and look forward to seeing you all on our next call on March 13th. Thanks so much.